I shouldn't be here, I whispered to myself as I stepped carefully across the polished tile floor, my towel clutched tightly around me, water dripping and forming tiny puddles that reflected the soft glow of the overhead lights, the echo of my own breathing loud in the otherwise silent apartment, the door behind me clicking shut with a hollow finality that made my stomach twist. And that's when I saw him, Dominic Romano, standing near the window, arms crossed, his silhouette framed by the city. Lights outside, every inch of him radiating authority and control, the kind of presence that made the air feel heavier, charged, almost electric, and I froze, caught mid-step, my mind scrambling for words that wouldn't come. The towel suddenly feeling inadequate, vulnerable, and utterly exposed in a way I hadn't anticipated, his steel blue eyes locking onto mine with that unnerving intensity that made my chest tighten. His jaw set, his posture perfectly still, but the room itself seemed to pulse with the quiet power emanating from him. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears as I realized I was standing in someone else's world, someone whose life moved on a different wavelength entirely, a place where every decision carried weight and consequence, a world I had no instructions to navigate, and yet here I was, trespassing in the quiet eye of his storm, my thoughts racing as he took a slow, deliberate step closer, the sound of his shoes on, the tile echoing like distant thunder, each motion calculated, measured, and impossible to ignore. I stepped back instinctively, my fingers brushing the edge of the countertop, grounding myself, trying to reclaim a fraction of composure, and Dominic's gaze never wavered, piercing and unrelenting, as though he could see everything in me, every hesitation, every fear, every impulse I tried to hide, and in that silence, the tension stretched, elongated, until it felt like it might snap, the hum of the lights above, the faint trickle of water, the city murmuring beyond the glass, every sound amplified, every shadow deepened, and then he finally spoke, his voice low and measured. "Who are you?" The simple question cutting through the thick air, demanding, challenging, impossible to deflect, and my heart lurched as I tried to respond, words fumbling, tripping over themselves, my breath catching halfway, and he took another step. Closer still, the heat from his presence brushing against my arm, his eyes softening just slightly, a hint of curiosity threading through the raw power in his expression, the vulnerability of that moment almost suffocating, yet strangely magnetic, drawing me into a gravity I couldn't resist, and before I could fully process, there was a sound from the corridor, a faint click, the wind from a passing car brushing against the window, and I felt a spark of fear, the real-world threat contrasting. With the surreal intimacy of the encounter, Dominic shifted subtly, just enough to shield me from the line of sight beyond the door, his movement protective, controlled, claiming the space without a word, and I realized that despite the shock, despite the fear, there was an undeniable thread of safety in his presence, the kind that demanded acknowledgement, the kind that hinted at layers beneath the surface, complexities I had yet to understand. And as he inclined his head slightly, waiting, assessing, the tension hanging thick between us, I knew this was the beginning, a collision of worlds neither of us expected, a spark that would ignite something far larger than either of us could predict, and the camera of my mind lingered on that gaze. Dominic's hand resting lightly on the edge of the counter, the soft city glow painting his face in high contrast, and I, standing there, towel clutched, breath ragged, pulse racing, understood that nothing would ever be quite the same from this moment forward, the question hanging in the air like an unspoken promise, a story just beginning. Olivia took a cautious step back, the towel clutched tightly around her, the water still dripping onto the tile floor creating a soft rhythm that matched the rapid beat of her heart, and Dominic shifted his weight slightly, the subtle movement almost imperceptible, yet it radiated a controlled presence that made her instinctively freeze, every thought racing, her mind searching for a plausible explanation, a way to navigate the tension in the room without further drawing his attention, and the soft hum of the ventilation above punctuated the silence, each second stretching, each breath deliberate. As Dominic slowly closed the distance between them, the city lights outside casting a mosaic of shadows across the room, highlighting the strong lines of his face, the calm, yet powerful demeanor that demanded acknowledgement, his gaze never leaving hers, sharp, yet measured, probing yet not aggressive. And Olivia felt the urge to speak, to justify her presence, but the words tangled in her throat, the careful balance between caution and curiosity keeping her rooted in place. Dominic tilted his head slightly, observing the micro-expressions, the subtle hesitations, the quiet movements that revealed more than words could convey. And in that silent exchange, a mutual awareness developed, an understanding that something unexpected had occurred, an intrusion into a world neither had anticipated. And yet, despite the initial shock, there was a rhythm forming, a subtle give and take, a careful choreography that neither fully recognized but both participated in instinctively. The soft click of the faucet as it dripped, the muffled sounds from the apartment beyond, the distant traffic blending with the quiet intensity between them. And Dominic spoke again, voice low, precise, "Stay where you are." A command not harsh, but firm enough to halt her impulses, and Olivia obeyed, feeling the strange mix of tension and safety in his presence, the magnetic pull of authority tempered by restraint. And the room seemed to contract, each detail amplified, the faint scent of cologne, the coolness of the tiles beneath her feet, the soft light catching the damp strands of her hair, each element a part of the unspoken narrative unfolding. And Dominic extended a hand, not aggressively, but with purpose, a gesture of guidance, a subtle invitation to step out of uncertainty without pressure. And Olivia hesitated, measuring the distance, the intention, the rhythm of the space around them, then took the hand, the touch brief, firm, but reassuring, anchoring her, grounding her. And as they moved toward the living area, the tension shifted, the awareness of boundaries, the acknowledgement of presence, the quiet understanding that each action carried weight. And she realized that this encounter, unplanned, abrupt, yet undeniably significant, had set in motion a connection, a thread of narrative that neither could ignore, a beginning forged in stillness, observation, and unspoken recognition, leaving both poised on the edge of a story that promised complexity, discovery, and the inevitable unfolding of events. And as they paused at the threshold of the apartment, Olivia looked into Dominic's eyes, noting the calculation, the patience, the subtle acknowledgement that this moment was theirs to navigate. And in that suspended breath, the anticipation hung, a promise of revelations yet to come, the quiet charge of proximity, the unspoken agreement to proceed carefully, and every second stretched, measured, filled with the potential of what lay ahead, the camera of the mind capturing the scene, Dominic's presence both commanding and protective, Olivia's uncertainty balanced by instinctive trust, and the world beyond the apartment seemed to recede, leaving only the charged space between them, a prelude to a story that had only just begun. The soft hum of the air conditioning filled the apartment as Olivia followed Dominic across the living area, her bare feet leaving faint damp prints on the hardwood floor, each step measured, cautious, the weight of the moment pressing down, yet simultaneously compelling her to move forward, a silent rhythm guiding her through unfamiliar territory, the city skyline glowing through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting long reflections across the room. And Dominic moved beside her with a deliberate calm, his presence unwavering, steady, as though the space itself bent to accommodate his control, the faint scent of leather and clean linen surrounding him, mingling with the subtle warmth of the apartment. And Olivia felt the strange mixture of tension and security, the kind that made her aware of every detail, every sound, every flicker of shadow, her senses hyper-alert, attuned to the nuances of the room, the subtle shifts in his posture, the micro-expressions that betrayed nothing yet communicated volumes. And she realized that despite the shock, despite the disorientation, she could not ignore the sense of clarity that accompanied his proximity, each movement intentional, each glance measured. And as they reached the seating area, Dominic gestured toward a chair, his hand steady, commanding, yet non-threatening, an unspoken offer of space, of grounding. And Olivia sat, the towel still wrapped tightly, water dripping slowly onto the floor, the sound a quiet metronome marking the passage of time, her mind racing, trying to process the sudden intrusion into his world, the unexpected collision of their lives. And he remained standing, just a few feet away, observing, the intensity of his gaze never wavering, yet tempered with a subtle curiosity, a quiet patience that encouraged observation without pressure, the faint light catching the sharp angles of his face. The coolness of the room offset by the underlying heat of anticipation, and Olivia felt herself drawn into the orbit of his attention, compelled to acknowledge the connection, to respond in kind, her thoughts a whirlwind of uncertainty, yet anchored by instinctive trust, a fragile thread that kept her rooted in place. Dominic finally spoke, his voice low, deliberate, cutting through the tension. "Do not move." A simple instruction, yet laden with authority and calm, the kind that demanded attention, respect, and consideration, and Olivia obeyed, her hands gripping the edges of the towel, knuckles white, breath steadying, the seconds stretching, elongated by the charged atmosphere, the quiet exchange forming a bridge between fear and understanding, between intrusion and consent, between chaos and order. And as Dominic moved toward the window, adjusting the blinds to let in just enough light to soften the shadows, he created a controlled environment, a deliberate framing of space, each action calculated, each detail intentional, the air itself seeming to pulse with his control. Olivia watching, absorbing, realizing that the encounter had shifted, the initial shock settling into a dynamic awareness, a sense of presence that was mutual yet unspoken, and she understood, without words, that this was more than an accident, more than an intrusion. It was a moment of alignment, a collision of worlds, a prelude to an understanding yet to unfold. And as Dominic returned his gaze to her, a slight nod, measured and deliberate, the room held its breath, time suspended, every flicker of movement significant, every glance weighted with meaning, the quiet intensity hinting at stories untold, promises unspoken, and a journey beginning, the threshold crossed, the stage set for revelations, connection, and the unfolding of a narrative neither had anticipated, leaving Olivia poised on the edge of anticipation, aware that the night had only just begun, the camera of the mind capturing every measured step, every calculated glance, every pulse of silent electricity that bound them in this delicate balance, a story waiting to reveal itself. The quiet of the apartment settled around them as Olivia adjusted her towel once more, the fabric damp against her skin, her movements careful, deliberate, every sense alert to the nuances of the space, the subtle creak of the hardwood beneath her feet, the soft hum of the city beyond the windows blending with the distant sound of a car passing on the street below. And Dominic watched, his posture relaxed yet commanding, the faint glow of the streetlights casting long shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp angles, the deliberate control in his expression and in the stillness. Olivia felt the weight of his presence, a gravity that drew her attention, focused, acute, making her hyper-aware of each breath, each blink, each beat of her heart, the air between them charged but not oppressive, a tension tempered with an undercurrent of unspoken understanding. And as she took a tentative step toward the seating area, he extended a hand, not forceful, but inviting, a gesture that encouraged movement without command, and she accepted, the contact brief yet grounding, her pulse quickening as the world seemed to narrow to the space between them, each step measured, deliberate, the rhythm of their motions almost synchronized, a dance of awareness and restraint. And Dominic spoke softly, voice calm, deliberate, cutting through the charged silence, "Sit." The single word imbued with authority yet not harsh. And Olivia lowered herself into the chair, her body still tense, eyes tracking his every movement. And he circled slowly, surveying the apartment with meticulous precision, noting the subtle details, the arrangement of objects, the play of light and shadow. And she observed him, curiosity mingled with apprehension, trying to discern intention without overstepping. Each movement a signal, a hint, a piece of the narrative unfolding silently. And the faint clatter of water from the kitchen echoed, a reminder of the ordinary world juxtaposed with the extraordinary moment. And Dominic returned to stand near the window, arms relaxed, yet radiating control, presence dominating the space without force, the soft lighting accentuating the contours of his face. The intensity of his eyes softened slightly by the glow, drawing Olivia into the unspoken dialogue, the careful balance of observation and response, the subtle acknowledgement that this moment was shared, the story unfolding in micro-expressions, in breath, in the quiet charge of proximity. And as he leaned lightly against the counter, fingers brushing the surface, Olivia felt the current of awareness deepen. The room contracted around them, each detail magnified, each sound, each shadow, each pause holding significance, a narrative built from stillness, observation, and careful engagement. And she realized the encounter had shifted, the initial shock giving way to tentative connection, awareness of presence, understanding of the silent language between them, the possibilities emerging in measured gestures, deliberate glances, and the quiet energy of proximity. And as Dominic tilted his head, eyes meeting hers, the faintest hint of curiosity threading through the intensity, Olivia understood that this was only the beginning, the prelude to a story that would unfold with each step, each observation, each deliberate interaction, leaving her poised at the edge of discovery, aware that every choice, every movement, every measured breath carried weight, the space between them charged with anticipation, a promise of the narrative yet to come, and the room seemed to hold its breath, time stretching, suspended. A moment captured in the delicate balance of observation, awareness, and unspoken agreement, the beginning of an unfolding connection that neither had expected, yet both were compelled to navigate. Olivia shifted in the chair, her fingers brushing against the smooth fabric of the cushion, trying to ground herself as the soft city lights filtered through the windows, painting abstract patterns across the hardwood floor. And Dominic moved deliberately to the coffee table, picking up a small object, turning it slowly in his hands, the motion precise, measured, drawing attention without a word. The quiet clicking of the object a subtle counterpoint to the rhythm of their breathing, and she watched, curiosity mingled with apprehension, the tension in the room thick yet strangely steady, every movement significant, charged with meaning beyond the ordinary. The hum of the ventilation blending with the distant city sounds outside, a soft murmur of life continuing unaware of the encounter within the apartment. And Dominic finally turned, eyes meeting hers. The intensity in his gaze softened by a hint of curiosity and assessment, and Olivia felt the pulse of the room shift, a subtle acknowledgement of the shared space, the unspoken rules governing their interaction, the delicate balance of control and observation. And as he extended a hand toward her, a silent invitation to move, she rose carefully, feeling the floor beneath her feet, the towel still wrapped tightly, the fabric cool against her skin, and they moved together across the room, each step deliberate, measured, the distance closing yet never rushing, the anticipation of the unknown threading through every movement. And Dominic gestured toward the couch, a subtle prompt, and she sat, settling in cautiously, the soft upholstery welcoming yet grounding, her senses heightened, aware of every detail, every shadow, every flicker of light. And he stood nearby, posture relaxed yet commanding, a presence that shaped the space without force, his gaze never leaving hers, observing, assessing, yet patient, allowing her to acclimate, to breathe, to inhabit the room alongside him without fear. And the air seemed to vibrate with the quiet intensity of attention, the room itself becoming a stage for a silent dialogue, the currents of emotion and awareness interweaving. Olivia in noting the subtle cues, the micro-expressions, the measured breaths, the careful gestures, each contributing to the unfolding understanding between them. And as Dominic finally spoke, voice low and deliberate, "You are safe here." The words carried weight, authority tempered with reassurance, resonating in the stillness. And Olivia exhaled, feeling the tension ease fractionally, the awareness of presence shifting from apprehension to tentative connection, the quiet acknowledgement of shared understanding threading through the charged atmosphere, the space between them a landscape of observation, measured action, and anticipation. And as the city lights flickered, reflecting across the room, Olivia recognized the delicate equilibrium established, the initial shock settling into attentive engagement, Each glance, each subtle movement, each carefully measured gesture contributing to a narrative that was simultaneously unfolding and contained. And she understood that this moment, though unexpected and unplanned, had created a bridge, a conduit for connection and awareness, the room holding the weight of possibility, the promise of dialogue, and the first step toward a story that neither had foreseen but both were now a part of. Every second stretched and significant, the quiet charge of the apartment enveloping them, Dominic's presence both commanding and protective, Olivia's attention acute, ready to navigate the unfolding path, the space suspended between anticipation and acknowledgement, a foundation laid for the narrative yet to continue, leaving both poised at the threshold of discovery, the unfolding of understanding, and the gentle momentum of a story beginning. Olivia leaned back slightly in the chair, her senses stretched to their limits. Each subtle sound of the apartment amplified in her awareness, the faint ticking of the wall clock, the distant murmur of traffic from the streets below, the soft hiss of the air conditioning filling the quiet spaces, and Dominic moved to the sofa across from her, every motion precise, deliberate, each step measured to maintain balance and control within the space, the city lights beyond the window casting long, shifting patterns that played across his features, highlighting the sharp angles, the controlled poise, the quiet authority that seemed to shape the room itself. And Olivia noticed the small details, the subtle creases in his tailored shirt, the slight furrow of his brow, the way his eyes scanned the room with a combination of assessment and awareness. And she realized that the moment held a tension that was both still and charged, a suspended awareness where every micro-expression, every small gesture, every measured breath communicated unspoken meaning. And Dominic finally gestured toward a small table between them, an invitation without words, and she shifted, moving closer, the chair gliding softly over the hardwood, her hands resting on her lap, knuckles brushing the smooth fabric, the warmth from her movements radiating into the space between them, and the awareness of proximity heightened, a shared consciousness of presence and observation forming, each of them carefully reading the other, absorbing the rhythm of the room, the subtle signals that conveyed intent without explicit statement, the quiet dance of attention and response unfolding with careful balance. And as Dominic lowered himself into the sofa, maintaining an upright, controlled posture, his gaze never leaving her, Olivia felt the faint stirrings of understanding, a recognition of the careful choreography that governed this encounter, the room itself becoming a space of focus, observation, and unspoken communication, the soft light accentuating textures, surfaces, the interplay of shadow and reflection, the subtle cues that shaped perception and response. And she drew a slow breath, letting her attention settle on the details, noting the way he held himself, the way his presence subtly commanded awareness, the careful equilibrium of energy, the measured patience threading through the tension, and in the quiet that followed, a sense of timing, of anticipation, of deliberate pacing settled over the room, each second elongated, filled with the potential for action, reaction, acknowledgement, a silent promise that this moment, while seemingly static, was imbued with direction, intent, and careful consideration. And as Dominic finally spoke, voice low, precise, resonant with calm authority, remain still, observe, and breathe. The words carried a weight that anchored the space, setting a rhythm, a shared understanding of presence, of attention, of cautious movement, and Olivia obeyed, settling into that rhythm, every muscle alert yet responsive, mind attuned to the nuances, the shifts, the subtleties of the encounter, the apartment a contained arena of observation, awareness, and emerging connection, the city beyond a distant hum, and in that suspended moment, the space between them held significance, charged with quiet energy, anticipation, and the unspoken promise of narrative unfolding. The encounter a careful interweaving of focus, patience, and measured engagement, leaving Olivia poised, attentive, and acutely aware that this chapter, while calm, marked the next step in a story neither had foreseen, yet both were compelled to navigate. Olivia remained seated, her hands resting lightly on her knees, feeling the tension in the room subtly shift as Dominic moved with deliberate care to adjust the blinds, allowing a soft cascade of city light to spill across the hardwood floor, illuminating small details she had not noticed before. The gentle warmth of the glow highlighting the textures of the furniture, the smooth lines of the table, the delicate reflections on glass surfaces. And as she absorbed the change in lighting, she became aware of the rhythm of the space, the careful interplay of presence, observation, and intent that Dominic maintained, his eyes scanning the room, not in haste, but with calculated patience, a quiet command embedded in each motion. And Olivia felt a mix of anticipation and cautious curiosity, each glance, each subtle movement carrying weight. The energy in the room balanced between stillness and unspoken potential. And Dominic finally spoke, his voice low, steady, carrying the precision of someone accustomed to control. "Notice everything," he said, and the words hung in the air, compelling attention, guiding perception, framing the moment. And Olivia obeyed instinctively, her eyes tracing the contours of the apartment, the interplay of light and shadow, the deliberate placement of objects, the subtle cues that conveyed presence, authority, and consideration. Each detail now a part of a narrative she was beginning to understand. And as Dominic took a seat across from her, posture relaxed yet commanding, the slight tilt of his head, the controlled focus in his gaze, reinforced the awareness of shared observation, the quiet communication that needed no words, the room itself a vessel for the unspoken dialogue unfolding between them. And Olivia noticed the careful alignment of movement and space, how every gesture, every micro-expression, every measured step was infused with purpose, shaping the perception of the moment, influencing the rhythm of engagement. And she felt herself adjusting to the cadence, learning to anticipate, to respond without overstepping, a subtle dance of attention and restraint. And the city outside continued its muted pulse, distant sirens, the faint hum of traffic, the occasional flicker of headlights casting passing shadows across the floor, blending with the soft sounds within the apartment, creating a layered auditory backdrop that enhanced the awareness of proximity and presence. And Dominic's gaze remained unwavering, steady, observing, assessing, his attention focused on her reactions, the shift of posture, the subtle cues of body language, the silent measurements of comfort and anticipation. And Olivia felt the balance of the encounter deepen, the initial shock dissipating, replaced by an acute attentiveness, a careful calibration of interaction, understanding that the room, the lighting, the space, and the gestures were part of a dialogue of control, observation, and connection. And as Dominic finally leaned back, a faint but deliberate gesture, his eyes never leaving hers, Olivia felt the quiet affirmation of awareness, a signal that this moment, though calm, was layered with potential. And the apartment seemed to contract around them, every detail amplified, each pause deliberate, every glance weighted with significance, the subtle energy of presence flowing between them, the anticipation of discovery, the awareness of the unfolding story. And the quiet rhythm of the evening continued, measured, attentive, charged, setting the stage for the next chapter of understanding and connection, leaving both poised, attentive, and fully aware that the narrative had only just begun. The next movements, gestures, and words poised to deepen the silent bond forming in the shared space. The soft glow of the city lights streamed through the blinds, casting intricate patterns across the apartment as Olivia adjusted in her seat, her hands lightly gripping the fabric of the towel, the water still clinging to her hair, each droplet catching the faint illumination. And Dominic remained near the window, his posture controlled, deliberate, yet the tension that had initially filled the room softened by a subtle shift in his expression, a trace of curiosity threading through the calm intensity. And Olivia felt herself drawn into the rhythm of observation, awareness, and measured engagement, each glance, each subtle micro-movement contributing to a silent dialogue unfolding between them. The hum of the city outside a constant, distant presence, blending seamlessly with the quiet of the apartment, the gentle tick of the clock, the soft whir of the ventilation, creating an ambient soundtrack that heightened the acuity of perception. And as Dominic moved to the sideboard, arranging a small stack of papers with meticulous care, the sound crisp, deliberate, a quiet demonstration of control that conveyed authority without force, Olivia observed, noting the precision, the patience, the deliberate pacing, and felt a strange sense of balance, a shared space of understanding forming. The charged energy between them shifting from tension to attentiveness, a calm but potent awareness. And as he returned to stand near the seating area, eyes meeting hers, the subtle tilt of his head, the careful focus of his gaze, carried a message unspoken yet clear, the unspoken acknowledgement of the encounter, of proximity, of presence. And Olivia breathed slowly, deliberately, matching the tempo, absorbing the careful choreography, the measured gestures, the nuances that spoke louder than words, the gentle ebb and flow of attention between them. And in the silence that followed, she became acutely aware of the narrative forming in the small gestures, the micro-expressions, the calibrated movements, each one a part of a dialogue that transcended verbal communication, the space between them charged, yet stable, anticipation threading through the stillness, a promise of unfolding connection, understanding, and revelation. And Dominic finally spoke, voice low, controlled, precise. Observe, consider, and act with intention. The words imbued with authority yet tempered with guidance, compelling her attention, aligning her awareness with the measured tempo of the room. And Olivia followed, mentally noting the careful balance of power, observation, and presence, every small motion of his reflecting an unspoken lesson, a subtle invitation to participate in the unfolding rhythm, the room itself a vessel for concentrated awareness, each detail amplified, each movement weighted with significance, the soft interplay of light and shadow accentuating textures, contours, and spaces, highlighting the deliberate nature of every action. And as the minutes stretched, the quiet understanding deepened, Olivia recognizing the significance of timing, spacing, and awareness. The energy between them neither rushed nor diminished, poised instead in a state of potential, the apartment holding the suspended attention, the anticipation of what was to come. And she felt herself attuned to the moment, to the narrative being created, the silent dialogue of measured interaction and observation, the subtle current of engagement between two worlds intersecting. And as Dominic's gaze lingered, steady, attentive, and deliberate, Olivia realized that this moment, though calm, was a pivot, the threshold of the story unfolding, a prelude to decisions, revelations, and understanding yet to emerge, every glance, every breath, every gesture contributing to the trajectory of the evening, leaving both poised on the edge of anticipation, aware that the narrative was only just beginning, the path ahead charged with awareness, attention, and the promise of discovery. Olivia shifted slightly in the chair, feeling the tension in the apartment subtly change as Dominic's gaze remained fixed on her, the room filled with a quiet intensity that seemed to slow time itself, the soft hum of the city beyond the windows blending with the gentle ticking of the clock, marking the passage of moments yet amplifying the weight of each second. And as she breathed, deliberately, carefully, she noticed how every detail seemed heightened, the texture of the towel against her skin, the polished surface of the hardwood floor, the faint reflections of light dancing across the walls. And Dominic moved closer, his steps deliberate, measured, each motion conveying purpose without haste, authority without pressure, the subtle shift of air around him signaling presence, control, and awareness. And as he stopped just a few feet away, the careful distance maintained, his posture relaxed yet commanding, Olivia felt the pulse of the space between them, a tangible rhythm of attention, observation, and anticipation, the quiet dialogue of movement and gesture unfolding without words. And Dominic spoke softly, deliberately, his voice carrying the weight of precision. "You are exactly where you need to be," the words resonating in the calm but charged air. And Olivia absorbed the meaning, understanding that the moment had shifted, the initial shock replaced with acute attentiveness, the awareness of shared space, presence, and purpose. And she felt her own focus sharpen, attuned to the subtleties of his movements, the slight inflections in his speech, the careful timing of each gesture, each glance, the unspoken communication threading through the room like an invisible current. And as she adjusted her posture, the faint rustle of the towel, The quiet scrape of the chair legs against the floor, the subtle interplay of light and shadow, all seemed magnified, contributing to a heightened sense of awareness, of presence, of interaction. And Dominic, observed, patient, deliberate, his gaze scanning, assessing, guiding the unspoken flow of the encounter. And Olivia found herself responding instinctively, aware of how every micro-expression, every nuanced movement created a rhythm they both adhered to, a choreography of attention, perception, and silent understanding. And the soft city lights flickered, casting fleeting patterns that seemed to mirror the shifting dynamics in the room, each moment elongated, each breath deliberate. And Olivia recognized the delicate balance, the careful exchange of energy, the subtle negotiation of awareness, trust, and observation. And Dominic finally inclined his head slightly, a motion precise, deliberate, and Olivia understood it as acknowledgement, recognition, and guidance. The unspoken agreement that this encounter, though still and calm, was a pivot, the threshold to a deeper story unfolding, the promise of further steps, decisions, revelations yet to come. And as the ambient light shifted across the space, Olivia felt the quiet momentum of the narrative, the suspended energy between them, a prelude to understanding, connection, and discovery, leaving both poised, attentive, and fully present in the charged stillness, the apartment holding the resonance of potential, anticipation, and the unfolding journey that awaited them beyond this moment. A story only just beginning, the first thread of what would continue to weave itself through the hours ahead, the weight of presence, awareness, and intentional interaction setting the stage for the chapters yet to be revealed.